HOA Karen targeted my child at bus stop. Didn't know I'm police chief and got arrested before we begin this incredible story of instant justice. Drop a comment telling us which country you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. The morning started like any other Tuesday. I was enjoying my coffee at home, dressed in casual clothes since I had a late shift at the department. My 12-year-old daughter, Sophia, had just left for the bus stop at the end of our cul-de-sac. We'd only moved into Oakwood Estates 3 months ago, and while the neighbors seemed pleasant enough, I hadn't had much interaction with the local HOA. That was about to change. I was reviewing some case files when my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. "Dad, there's a lady yelling at me and saying I can't wait here." I frowned. Put her on speaker. Through the phone, I heard a woman's shrill voice. "This bus stop is for Oakwood Estates residents only. I've never seen you before. You need to leave immediately or I'm calling the police." "Ma'am," I said calmly through the phone, "that's my daughter. We live at 1432 Pinecrest Lane." "No you don't," she shot back. "I know every family in this neighborhood, and there's no child living at that address. You're trespassing on private property and bringing down our property values." I sighed, grabbing my keys. "I'll be right there, Sophia. Let me tell you a little background of me before I tell you what actually happened on that day." We'd moved to Oakwood Estates following my promotion to Chief of Police 3 months ago. After 15 years on the force in the bustling city of Riverside, I was ready for a change of pace. The quiet suburban town of Oakwood seemed perfect. Good schools for Sophia, less crime, and a chance for us to heal after my wife Jennifer's passing 2 years prior. The house on Pinecrest Lane was everything we wanted. A colonial with a wraparound porch for bedrooms, and a backyard with enough space for the golden retriever puppy Sophia had been begging for. The previous owners had taken an overseas job assignment and needed to sell quickly, which meant we'd moved in with minimal neighborhood fanfare. Between getting settled at the station and helping Sophia adjust to her new school, I hadn't prioritized neighborhood socializing. We'd waved to a few neighbors, exchanged pleasantries with the elderly couple next door, but that was the extent of our community integration. I'd received the HOA welcome packet, skimmed the bylaws, paid the dues and filed it away. According to my department colleagues who lived in the area, Oakwood Estates was known for its strict HOA, but I figured as long as we kept our lawn maintained and garbage bins out of sight, we'd be fine. In retrospect, flying under the radar might have been our first mistake. When I arrived at the bus stop 2 minutes later, I found a middle-aged woman in a pastel pink tracksuit standing over my daughter, who was on the verge of tears. 3 other neighborhood kids stood awkwardly to the side, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding before them. One of them, a red-headed boy about Sophia's age, kept looking between my daughter and the woman with a pained expression. "Are you the father?" she demanded, not recognizing me despite the fact I'd driven past her house every day for the past 3 months. "You need to take your child and leave. This is a private neighborhood amenity." I stepped between her and Sophia, placing a reassuring hand on my daughter's shoulder. Sophia's eyes were red-rimmed and she clutched her purple backpack, a birthday gift from her aunt, tightly against her chest. "Ma'am, I'm Michael Chin. We moved in 3 months ago. My daughter has every right to be here." The woman looked me up and down with a skepticism that felt all too familiar. Despite my position, I was used to being underestimated or challenged because of my appearance. At 5 feet 8 inches with a lean build, I didn't fit the stereotypical image of a police chief, and my Asian heritage often led people to make assumptions. Today, dressed in jeans and a plain navy sweater rather than my uniform, I looked like any other dad. She crossed her arms, her French manicured nails tapping against her biceps. "I'm Patricia Winters, HOA president. I've documented every family in this subdivision, and I don't have you on my list. Besides, your daughter's backpack doesn't comply with the HOA aesthetic guidelines for school accessories." I blinked, wondering if I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" Patricia's lips thinned into a smug smile as she continued. "Article 7, Section 4 of our bylaws clearly states that all visible items in common areas must adhere to the neighborhood's earth tone color palette. That bright purple backpack is a violation." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay professional. In my years of law enforcement, I dealt with all types of difficult personalities. This woman was testing my patience, but I needed to set an example for Sophia. "Mrs. Winters, there's no such restriction on children's school supplies. I've read the bylaws thoroughly." I had, in fact, reviewed them carefully before purchasing the house, wanting to ensure there were no ridiculous restrictions that would affect our quality of life. Patricia's face flushed. "Well, I'm implementing it effective immediately," she snapped, pulling out her phone. Now remove your daughter from the premises or I'm calling the authorities. At this point, the yellow school bus pulled up to the curb. The other kids quickly boarded while Patricia physically moved to block Sophia from getting on, placing her arm across the bus entrance. That's enough, I said firmly, my patience evaporating as she physically obstructed my child. You're preventing my child from accessing public school transportation. Please step aside. The bus driver, an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair, looked confusedly between us. Is there a problem here? He asked, clearly concerned about the delay to his route. There certainly is, Patricia declared. This child doesn't belong in this neighborhood. She turned to me, finger jabbing in my direction. I'm calling the police. She began dialing dramatically, her acrylic nails clicking against her phone screen. Go ahead, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my badge. Chief Michael Chin, Oakwood Police Department. I'd be happy to discuss this matter with my officers. Her face went from smug to shocked in an instant. Her phone nearly slipped from her hand. In fact, I continued, my voice level but firm, putting your hands on my daughter and preventing her from boarding her school bus constitutes assault and false imprisonment of a minor. You're now officially under arrest. Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But I'm the HOA president. And I'm the chief of police, I replied, gesturing for Sophia to get on the bus. We can continue this conversation downtown. Sophia hesitated before boarding. Dad, are you coming home tonight? Her voice was small, and I could see the day's events had rattled her. Of course, sweetheart. This won't take long. I'll be home for dinner and we can have pizza. I gave her a reassuring smile. As the bus pulled away, I could see her small smile through the window. She gave me a tiny wave, and the red-headed boy who'd been watching earlier moved to sit beside her. At least she might have made a friend out of this mess. The same officers who had welcomed us with cookies when we moved in arrived within minutes, looking confused to find their boss in a standoff with a woman in a pastel tracksuit in the middle of a suburban cul-de-sac. Officer Jenkins, a seasoned veteran with 20 years on the force, approached cautiously. Chief? Everything okay here? Officer Jenkins, please take Mrs. Winters into custody. Charges are harassment, false imprisonment, and assault of a minor. Patricia's face had turned from red to white. You can't be serious. This is an abuse of power. I demand to speak to your supervisor. Jenkins looked between us, bewildered. Chief, I don't think you have a supervisor. At least not one that handles this sort of thing. Exactly, I said, maintaining my composure. Mrs. Winters, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As I continued reading her Miranda rights, neighbors began emerging from their homes, curious about the police cars. Patricia's husband, a tall man in a business suit clearly just home from work, came running down the street. Patricia? What on earth is happening? He looked between his wife and the officers in disbelief. Mr. Winters, I said, extending my hand. I'm Michael Chen, the new police chief. I'm afraid your wife is being arrested for assaulting and harassing my 12-year-old daughter at the bus stop. Your daughter? His face registered confusion, then recognition. Wait, you bought the Hendersons' place? Patricia told me that house was vacant. This explained part of the confusion but not her behavior. Regardless of what she thought, physically blocking a child from boarding a school bus and harassing her crosses a line. Mr. Winters turned to his wife. Patricia, what were you thinking? We've talked about this. You can't keep confronting people in the neighborhood like this. Patricia's face twisted in anger. They're ruining our property values, Richard. Did you see that purple backpack? It's completely against our aesthetic guidelines. Richard's face fell and he ran a hand down his face. I'm so sorry, Chief Chin. My wife takes the HOA rules very seriously. He turned to me, lowering his voice. She's been under a lot of stress lately. Our son just left for college, and she's been channeling all her energy into the HOA. While I sympathized with empty nest syndrome, it didn't excuse her behavior. I understand, but that doesn't give her the right to terrorize a child. Patricia Winters spent 4 hours in a holding cell before her husband bailed her out. The booking process had been awkward for everyone involved. My officers tried to maintain professionalism while processing the HOA president who had been baking them cookies just weeks earlier at the station's community outreach event. The charges included harassment, false imprisonment, and assault of a minor. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that evening and removed her as president. When I returned home that evening with the promised pizza, Sophia seemed more relaxed. We sat at our kitchen island, still surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. How was school? I asked, trying to move past the morning's events. Actually, kind of good, she said, surprising me. Everyone wanted to know about what happened. Ethan, he's the boy who sits next to me in math, he told everyone his mom says Mrs. Winters has been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. She took a bite of pizza. He invited me to his birthday party this weekend. I smiled, relieved that something positive had emerged from the situation. That's great, sweetheart. Dad. Sophia pushed her pizza around her plate. Are we going to have trouble here now? Will people hate us? The vulnerability in her question broke my heart. Since her mother's death, Sophia had been worried about fitting in, about being stable. This move was supposed to provide that stability. No, sweetheart, I said firmly. If anything, I think we might finally get to know our neighbors. I was right. The next morning, as Sophia waited at the bus stop, our neighbors came by one to introduce themselves properly and apologize for Patricia's behavior. Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street brought homemade empanadas. The elderly couple next door, the Johnsons, brought a potted plant for our porch. Ethan's mother, Sarah, invited us to a neighborhood barbecue that weekend. We're so sorry about Patricia, Sarah said, shaking my hand. She's been getting worse over the past year. The previous HOA president moved away 6 months ago, and since Patricia took over, it's been intense. Why hasn't anyone stood up to her? I asked. Sarah sighed. She knows everyone's technical violations of the HOA rules and isn't afraid to use them as leverage. The Andersons' fence is 2 inches too high, the Garcia's shed is the wrong shade of brown, the Patel's garden has non-approved plants. She's been selectively enforcing rules against anyone who crosses her. By the end of the week, we'd been invited to 3 barbecues, a block party, and a neighborhood watch meeting. The latter was particularly ironic given my profession, but I welcomed the chance to integrate both personally and professionally with the community. A week after the incident, I received a letter from Patricia's attorney requesting that the charges be dropped. Attached was a formal apology letter and her resignation from the HOA board. While tempted to proceed with the charges as a matter of principle, I considered what would best serve the community and my daughter. After consulting with the district attorney, I agreed to reduce charges with community service requirements, including mandated training on conflict resolution and cultural sensitivity. Patricia would also be barred from serving on the HOA board for 5 years. The weekend after the resolution, the Oakwood Estates community held its annual spring picnic. Sophia and I attended, bringing a homemade noodle salad that had been Jennifer's specialty. As we approached the park, I felt a momentary hesitation, wondering if there would be lingering awkwardness. Instead, we were greeted warmly. Ethan ran up to Sophia immediately, introducing her to his friends. I found myself surrounded by neighbors eager to chat with the new police chief who had finally put boundaries on the HOA's overreach. You know, we've never had this many people at the spring picnic, Bob Johnson, the newly elected HOA president, told me as we stood by the grill. I think people feel like they can breathe again. Patricia and Richard Winters made a brief appearance, dropping off a casserole before quickly leaving. Patricia avoided eye contact with everyone, especially me and Sophia. Richard, however, approached us before departing. Chief Chin, I wanted to thank you, he said quietly. Patricia is seeing a therapist now. This incident was a wake-up call. She's realizing there are better ways to channel her energy than policing the neighborhood. I nodded, appreciating his honesty. I'm glad something positive has come from this. As summer approached, our house finally felt like home. The last boxes were unpacked, and Sophia had convinced me to adopt a golden retriever puppy she named Badge. Our fence was painted the HOA-approved shade of white, our lawn was meticulously maintained, and, in a small act of rebellion approved by the new HOA board, we planted a garden of wildly colorful flowers that attracted butterflies and compliments in equal measure. As for Patricia, she now crosses the street when she sees either of us coming. And Sophia? She bought an even brighter backpack for the new school year, neon green with purple polka dots. Bob Johnson, upon seeing it at the community pool, declared it a fine addition to the neighborhood's character. Sometimes people need a reminder that no HOA bylaw trumps actual law, and that you never know who your new neighbors might be. In Oakwood Estates, that reminder came in the form of a 12-year-old girl with a purple backpack and her father, who happened to be the police chief.